Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this LOTI Leadership Series webinar, one of our very first, where our aim is to connect you with interesting practice going on globally. Some of you may not have met me. I'm Eddie Copeland. I'm the Director of the London Office of Technology and Innovation. We're here in London helping boroughs work together to use digital and data innovation to improve public services and outcomes for Londoners. As part of that, we know we need to help connect councils with great ideas, interesting examples, thought-provoking examples from around the world. And it's a great pleasure today to be able to welcome the team from the Open Government Products team at the Singapore government. You'll see on the screen colleagues Stephanie Seo, we've got Talitha Chin, who is Senior Product Manager, and Leonard Liu, who is Head of Products. Real pleasure to have them with us today. They're going to be talking through a bit of context for us all about where they fit within the Singapore landscape. They'll be sharing some of the tools that they have developed, some of which are available to governments anywhere in the world, and they'll be talking a little bit about the rationale behind it as well. So I look forward to hearing all of that. There'll be a chance after their presentations for you to share your own comments and questions as part of the Q&A. But for now, Leonard, am I handing over to you as our first presenter?
Sure.
Welcome.
Thanks a lot, Eddie. Let me share my screen again. Can everyone see my screen?
We can indeed, yes.
Okay, great. So really excited to be here. So, my name is Leonard. I head a product team at Open Government Products, and also today I have my amazing colleagues with me, Talitha and Stephanie. And I'm gonna start off by introducing our team, talk a bit about what we do, what our mission and values are, and then I'll just have like one pager for a bunch of our products to orientate everyone, on what we're doing, and actually hand off to Talitha for I think the second half of my presentation to really deep dive into Redeem, one of our products. It's a national voucher system, but let me not mention more than that so that I don't become a spoiler of Talitha's presentation. So let's begin. So this is how we look like, right? It was getting a bit difficult to squeeze everyone into one picture, and our team has grown quite a bit. Today we're at about 100+ people. Well, just 1 year ago we were, I think, about 70, if I'm not wrong. And we're basically, we run like a modern tech company within the Singapore government, solving things for public good. So we're an in-house team of practitioners, of engineers, designers, product managers, partnerships folk, marketing, and a whole bunch of other functions as well. And how we're situated in the Singapore government is we're actually part of this central agency called the Prime Minister's Office, under which there is a tech. You can imagine it as a bit like a ministry of tech. There's this organization called GovTech. There's 3,000 strong, and we're a team within that organization that's focused on experimentation. Which brings us to our mission, which is to experiment, demonstrate, and propagate. So when I mean experiment, I mean not just new types of products, but we really go far into defining our own HR policy as well, our own finance policy. For example, we have our own career schema, and we experiment with 360 perf evaluation processes, our own internal bulk tender for finance, and a whole bunch of other things that we tried as well. But the point is not just to experiment, but really to show that these practices have value, deploy them, within our team as we grow, and also in terms of products, deploy them at the national scale as well. We have quite a few products that are widely used on a daily basis by the entire Singapore population, so that's about 45 million. And at the end of the day, don't just stop there, but really propagate our good practices to the rest of GovTech, to the rest of Singapore government, and really to the rest of the world, which is why we're here today, to start such propagation efforts, because our dream is really to contribute towards a tech blueprint for how public good should be done, which is why we're here today to share with everyone here, but really also at the end to tap everyone's insights on how we can work together on improving public good all around the world. And these are our values. They're written here on the screen. I just want to point one interesting point out is the one in the middle. It's how we empower people, and this is very important to us. I like to describe our team as being run like an incubator, where we have a lot of different product teams that function like startups, And our goal, so my goal, I guess, so as head of products, is not really to intervene and tell the different product teams what they should be doing, but creating that space for them to flourish and solve problems for public good. And which brings us to our products. And today we have about 15 or so production projects, several of which are national scale that are widely used, and I'm going to talk about some of them. So for this next section, I'm going to run through just a one-pager of each of these products, and I think what might be useful for everyone is that I actually specify the contact information of the product manager that's responsible for these products. So just in case if you're interested to learn more about this product, and some of these are open source, so if you're interested to even use some of our code or maybe collaborate more with the product team, all the contact information is here at the bottom for hopefully follow-ups. All right, so let's start. So the first is form.gov.sg, one of our most popular products, and this is our answer to paper forms. So before this was started, there were, I remember when I first joined the team, I had to fill in, like 10 paper forms for onboarding, right? So, I got to be frustrated and say, hey, I think we're in the digital age, we should be leveraging mobile optimized, user-friendly digital forms, and that gave birth to form.gov.sg. And I would say the secret sauce here, as compared to commercial form builders, is our zero-knowledge architecture. What do I mean by that? I mean that we collect all these data from all across, but we don't actually store that data on the cloud. We either email the data and delete it, or use end-to-end encryption. How I would better explain end-to-end encryption is similar to how WhatsApp does for messages. We do it for forms. You know how the WhatsApp team presumably is not privy of people's messages on their phone because of end-to-end encryption. Similarly, the form.gov.sg team cannot see people's sensitive form responses. And this secret sauce, I would say, is actually the key for us actually scaling form.gov.sg across even particularly sensitive use cases. And today, this has digitized over 300,000 forms and has been submitted over 150 million times. Next, we have go.gov.sg, which is our government link shortener. And this was born to solve phishing problems from commercial link shorteners, because we realized that there were many content that was shared with Bitly links, with TinyURL links, with Google shortener links, and that became quite easy for malicious actor to phish victims and steal personal information and even do more damage. Which is why go.gov.sg it's an easy way with a few clicks to share your content with a .gov.sg link. And today, this is widely used. I think there's been over 300 million clicks, if I'm not wrong. Next, we have isomer.gov.sg, which is our website builder. And once again, the secret sauce here, I think there are two that makes it quite different from, let's say, Wix.com or Squarespace out there. The first is that we deliberately constrain design, but give public officers control over their content. The hypothesis here is that the average public officer is not an expert on design. They're not experts in typography, in what are the right colors, in how to make things mobile optimized, which is why we constrain on those. As you can see here, like our websites look relatively as user-friendly. We constrain those, but give users the power to modify the content. So that's the first design principle. The second secret sauce, I would say, is that we're hosted with a static site architecture, which means that we don't have a database for our websites, and that's to address two key challenges. One is to create scalability. So a big problem of all government sites is that the moment they're up, and if a huge horde of people descend on it, they just crash. Our answer to that is to remove the database, because then we can cache that data and then it becomes a lot more scalable. The second is for cybersecurity concerns. If there's no database, there's no data to hack. So with this kind of so-called, the way we designed the product, we've managed to have this adopted by over 100 government sites in Singapore as well. And next is Postman. Postman is our messaging solution, where a public officer can, in a few clicks, send millions of messages to citizens and businesses across WhatsApp, Telegram, SMS, and email. And this was actually started during COVID, the start of COVID, when we wanted to send daily COVID updates through WhatsApp to the whole, a big part of the population, to really appease concerns and to cut through any fake news in the WhatsApp platform. And since then, past COVID, we also expanded this to other channels, SMS, email, Telegram, that has since powered, I think, tens of millions of messages. And this is a fairly new product, another one called vault.gov.sg. And it's a tool to help agencies manage data better so that with a few clicks, they can turn them into insights and manage their operations as well. And this was born because we first started form.gov.sg, which is a data collection service, and then people were collecting a lot of data, and but then that's not the end of their workflow. After they collect data, they have to, deal with that data. They have to slice and dice it. They have to clean it. They have to visualize it for reporting purposes, and all of these, I would say, downstream use cases is what Vault is for. So we just started this product about 2 months ago. So compared to the earlier products that I presented, this one, we still only have a few users and we're starting small. We are sitting down with them, figuring out how they use this managed data service and iterating on that before actually attempting to go for scale and getting the whole government to use it. And another similarly early product that we have is SGID, which is privacy preserving authentication service. So in Singapore, the dominant authentication provider is called SingPass. It's done by another department in GovTech. And SGID is, you can put it as an experimental version of that, where we focus on privacy preserving elements. And the reason why this is useful is because we want a way for businesses to get information from citizens that are verified by the Singapore government. And this opens up a whole bunch of use cases, like when you're opening a bank account, during the KYC process, citizens could just share such verified information with the banks. When you're opening a new phone line, you can share with the telcos, or even when you're going down to a convenience store to verify that you're of legal age to buy alcohol, right? You could actually share that verified birth date information with the store as well. And how we do it in a privacy preserving way is really baked into how our systems are designed. We have an identity server and a transaction server, and they're separate. The identity server knows who you are, and the transaction server knows what you do. But because they don't come together, the state, I guess the SGID team, we don't actually know who did what. So that is our attempt to make such data sharing privacy preserving in order to unlock those use cases of verified data sharing. And the last thing that I want to go through is this health appointment system. And this was a big one, especially during COVID. It was basically our national vaccination appointment system where people can go somewhere with a few clicks, book a date to go down to a clinic to get vaccinated against COVID-19. So we started from there, but since then we've also adapted this for other kinds of vaccinations, such as pneumococcal, and we're also soon going to expand it to flu vaccination. But it doesn't stop there, because we already have a good tool for appointment booking of preventive healthcare, we call it that way. We're also going to expand it to booking of sports facilities and programs as well, right? So basically, I've just run through some of our products, each of which is just the tip of the iceberg sharing, just one pager, and I hope that with this, I guess, little bit of information about some of these products, this could spark further follow-ups and conversations around potential collaborations. And also, if you have a similar product that you're working on in your teams as well, we'd like to keep in touch and really learn from your experiences of how we can do better in all of these areas of data management, identity, health appointment, messaging, website, and the list goes on too. So I've taken quite a bit of time already. I think it's time to hand over to my colleague, Talita, to deep dive, into one of these products called Redeem.
Hi everyone, I'm Khalifa. So I am a senior product manager at Open Government Products. I used to live in London and study in London, so the place is very dear to my heart, and I'm very happy to be with you all. So maybe just to start, I'm going to be talking about this voucher system we started during the COVID times. And I understand from Eddie that cost of living issues are very pertinent in London right now. And so actually we have been using this voucher system this year for the similar issues we are facing right now with a tax rise in Singapore, looming tax rise. And just wanted to start by sharing some context on why this system came about, and then what the product is and how we work. So just to give you a bit of context, in the Singapore government, we distribute many vouchers, many paper vouchers, and in the past, tracking redemption was extremely tedious. So government officers will be collecting these vouchers, they'll be counting it manually and then writing down on paper. And very similarly, on the merchant's end, they will be collecting these paper vouchers and counting them as well. And it's very expensive to print and distribute these vouchers. And lastly, it took months to a year to set up any voucher campaign. And so we really wanted to make it much easier to issue vouchers, especially with the need for social assistance in this time. So our vision is actually to work towards a state where we don't even need to key in paper voucher records and we are digital by default. And most importantly, we want to make it a lot easier to give, to issue vouchers and to provide social assistance to citizens in need. So today, we have about 800 million Singapore dollars worth of voucher campaigns. That translates to maybe around 500 million pounds thereabouts, if my conversion rate is correct. And we have been using this for several voucher campaigns across government. So I'm going to chat a bit about what is this product, and then we can take questions. So just a super basic overview. Government wants to give out money, and typically what we find across the board is they have a particular group of people in mind. For example, they have criteria like your income limit. If you only earn a certain amount, will you be able to receive this voucher? You only want to issue one per household. And then you want it to be spent not at any merchant, but at targeted merchants who were impacted by COVID, for example. So you need a merchant list. And in this case, we wanted to help a lot of the neighborhood shops below people's the equivalent of maybe a council flat in Singapore is a HDB flat. And we wanted to target these merchants that were affected by COVID. So how did we help and enable this to happen? So our system currently has different views. The first one is for residents. The second one is for government officers. And the third one is for merchants. So for residents, we have a sign-up page and a voucher link. For the government, we have an admin portal. And then for merchants, we have this merchant mobile app that they can download. And a very high level overview is all of these connect with our APIs. And then we also enable payouts. The end-to-end voucher lifecycle looks like this, and I'll walk through it step by step. So the first one is claiming the voucher. So typically, people need to sign up on a website. They'll go to this website, and then they will log in with our national identity system called SingPass to verify that they are who they are. So once they verify they are who they are, we will make sure that we have their household details, and we also check against their name and records, and then they will claim the voucher. So in this case, we actually make sure that only one per household will claim the voucher. But the situation perhaps in both the UK and Singapore is that not everyone might have a phone. We need to cater to those also who are less digitally savvy. So what we also provide for is the government officer to have an admin portal that looks like this. And they can always add the recipient and issue the voucher to those without phones or those who need help figuring out their national identity system. And we can even print out the voucher for them on the spot. So that was the first part, the voucher claiming process. We have this both digital and paper claims. Now the second step is really how to issue the voucher. So the way it works, and this is how we've arrived at, is we just send them an SMS, they click on a voucher link, and then they'll be able to share this voucher with family members, and they actually tap on the vouchers to use it, similar to maybe a typical voucher concept where it's like denominations. So they select vouchers and they'll show the voucher to be used. So again, paper vouchers are just used in the exact same way. You will show the voucher to the merchant to be scanned. So the most important step is this voucher redemption step, where the merchants will be having a mobile app where they will scan the voucher, whether it's digital or paper, and then they will check that the voucher is valid and there'll be a success page. So one of the key benefits of the system is that we really trim the time it takes for merchants to receive money. So in the past, it used to take weeks to months for merchants to receive money. Now we make sure they get it the next day. And true enough, I think we received a lot of positive feedback that they welcomed the faster payment and they thought that it was a very good move moving to digital. I'm just going to show you a short video of how actually this works. So this is at the hawker. Yeah, so that was just a short video of how it works. And yeah, that is just merchant scanning. Quite similarly, some of the residents actually, surprisingly, the key benefit they saw is, you know, it's fun and they received, it resonated with them because actually it's different from just getting it in your bank account and it doesn't register, but they actually click and can play with the voucher. So I'm just going to briefly chat about how did we go about designing this? I think the first principle is iterative product development, something Leonard talked about earlier. And this is very similar, might be a familiar product design approach where we have the kind of build, measure and learn approach. And to arrive at this, we really had a series of many trials over months to make sure that we design the system in a manner that is easy for people to use. So this is just some photos of the actual product team, you know, going down to merchants and teaching them how to use the system and talking to residents. Yeah, and maybe the second principle that we hold strongly to is having cross-functional and empowered teams. What do I mean by this? So this is essentially what our team looks. We have various functions, but actually all of us, even though we have different functions, we actually come together and we wear multiple hats. So as a product manager myself, I will think a bit about user experience and also engineering and operations. As an engineer, they will still be doing user testing and also reason about product. And we do courses in all of the fields. And this allows us to, for example, really understand the user issues deeply. All of us participate in trials and talk to users. But we also, each of us will have this degree of ownership and empowerment to make change. We don't need to, for example, clear multiple levels to get decisions made. And we can actually lead discussions no matter whether we are fresh graduate or a team lead in the team. So I'm just going to end our sharing with some frequently asked questions, mindful of time. So the first question people often ask us is, why don't we have an e-wallet? Why are these vouchers in fixed denominations? So I think the main reason is that we actually did a user trial and we found that people made a lot of mistakes keying in the exact amount. For example, you might select the wrong amount in a drop down, or you might have thought of using only $10, but you key in $100. So we actually thought that this tab version was actually a lot easier to use. And the second question is, why does it have to be the merchant even to scan the vouchers? I think the main reason is that we really know that the people who most need help might not have phones and they might not be digitally savvy. And so if it were e-wallet, it would be the residents scanning the merchant's QR code, and that would not cater to an easy paper voucher fallback. Right, that keying in the exact amount will not allow for a paper voucher fallback. And so we actually decided the merchant has to scan, and that's the design today. And in future, what we are working towards is just to scale our voucher system, not just to handle a lot of these vouchers that right now are either to uplift heartland merchants' situation or for cost of living issues, but to scale across government agencies. And that's the end of my sharing. I hope that we'll be very happy to chat with any of your teams if you're keen to learn more. So I've left my email here if you'd like to chat more. And that's all. I'll return the time to Eddie. Thank you.
Thank you both for really, really fascinating overview of your work, those products. I love just how clean, how simple, how user focused they are. I mentioned in the chat, I think some of the preventative or the design considerations about cybersecurity building into things like the link shortener, building into the website, not having its sort of the database attached, feels really proactive, getting on the front foot of some of these very thorny issues. Let me put out an open call now for people just to mull over what questions they have for the Singapore team. Have a think. In a moment, I'll ask you to raise your hands or to post it in the chat. If I could abuse my role as sort of chairing this meeting and just ask a couple that have struck me, could you give us a bit more context on who chooses what you work on? Like, who is the customer? It's a fascinating, in a UK context, sometimes digital teams have struggled to get engagement from central government departments or other local authorities. Do you choose these? Do they? Tell us a bit more about how that works.
Yeah, I think I can answer this. So I would say it's a mix of like ground up approach, you know, where our team actually figures out what so talk to end users, be it citizens and businesses directly, figure out the problem statements are, build them and pitch them to agencies. It's a mix of that and also a bit more agency driven, where agencies actually bring us their problem statements and then we figure out how to match them in the middle as well. So I would say maybe to answer this question more broadly, a big strategy that we use is what I call the OGP suite, where we actually have different platform products like forms, the identity providers and all that can actually be combined to solve problems in multiple domains. So imagine like if an agency says, you know, hey, you know, I have a problem for like grant applications, how do I manage that process well? They could just come to the OGP suite and drag and drop some of these tools together and actually build that on their own, right? So this is one way where if we prioritize building platform products that can be easily, you know, like Lego blocks combined together, then we could empower agencies to solve a whole bunch of all these problems. So that's more of the first bucket, where, you know, that's how we look at the type of so-called problems to solve for, and our approach is this kind of like OGP suite approach. In order to prioritize other problems, I would say this is a fairly difficult question to answer, to be honest, because, you know, unlike the commercial space where you could look at the bottom line. In our case, it's a bit hard to prioritize, let's say, I don't know, life saved from Ministry of Health with jobs created from Ministry of Manpower. Which one's more important? Which one should we work on? I would say it's. I mean, as a product person, you can say it's some sort of like material benefit, the extent of material benefit multiplied by the size of the group that's impacted. But I would say that the bigger thing that we also focus on is which problem is more bureaucratically vulnerable at the moment. So which problem has access for us to go in and really move the needle. So in the past 2 years, that was COVID. And because of COVID, the healthcare space opened up access, you know, for technical teams like ourselves to go in and solve a whole bunch of problems there, which is where we went. So I would say that is how we also like work closely with agencies by seeing which agencies are the most open to work with at the moment, rather than figuring that, you know, we're having this global prioritization and we're really working on the most optimal problems at any one time.
That's really helpful. I love the phrase bureaucratic vulnerability. It's a nice one that might resonate with some of my UK colleagues here. I guess a follow on from that, our London's Chief Digital Officer, Theo Blackwell's asked a question in the chat. I think building on what you've just said, Leonard, around one of the challenges we have in the UK is trying to explain what's the likely ROI. Like, if we spend this much money invested in this digital process, are we going to get that back? And having that debate with finance officers, etc. How do you think about business cases or return on investment, if at all, in the products that you've developed?
Yeah, the way I think of it more is that there's an impact equation, right? An impact equation involves revenue and cost. And we're focused a little bit more on the cost side of the equation, where the things that we build give back more time and money to agencies. Let's say FormSG, right? With a few clicks, you can actually digitize a form. So that removes like manual data entry that could cost like many hours. So I think we're more heavily focused on that. Because the revenue side of the equation, like I mentioned earlier, impact sometimes could be hard to quantify across different use cases.
Understood. Thank you.
Maybe
please,
just.
oh, Talita, yeah.
Yeah, maybe just to add to Leonard, I think a lot of it is also being cognizant of like what are the cost savings in terms of in-house built systems versus vendor built systems. I think a lot of the trade-off is, for example, what would equivalent system cost if we were to outsource? So that's a question we ask ourselves. And to make sure that we follow through on tracking all these cost savings, a lot of what we do is to set up metrics dashboards where we actually track the ROI and see whether after we launch the product, it's actually resulting in these cost savings that we predicted.
And also, to add on again, oh no, sorry, I think I cut Stephanie. You want to go first?
Sure. I just wanted to add that, thanks so much, Theo, for your question. I just wanted to add that I think the funding approach that the team adopts is quite different from a typical agency or ministry, where sometimes the funding is provided all upfront. It's all at once, and this can cost tens of if not hundreds of millions of dollars or pounds or whatever currency you're using. But tech development, especially new systems to replace legacy systems, is incredibly expensive. And what the team does is to resource projects that are showing that they have some kind of traction and have take up and are successful in working. As the team likes to put it, all of us think that we're Steve Jobs. So we all think that we have great solutions in our heads, but that's usually not the case. Many of our ideas that we think are good ideas will fail. And so what the team does is to resource it from an experimental approach first, and only when it's gained traction, only when it's gained sufficient support, does it actually get the full resourcing that the team needs. In short, MVPs and prototypes the bedrock of, or the cornerstone of whether or not you continue to finance the project for the years, if not decades to come. And if not, the project is actually deprioritized, it's shut down, and the resources are allocated elsewhere. There are just so many possible projects to take up. There's a whole backlog. There's a whole line of things that the team and many other tech teams in government wish that they could be working on. And if something is not working, we just reprioritize elsewhere. So that's, I think, one of the differences in the financing approach. Please go on, Leonard.
That was actually what I wanted to say as well, but yeah, that's great.
I wonder, just a couple of the points you've mentioned there, I wonder if any of you would like to expand on. So one is interested if you're willing and able to share any examples of products that started but which sounded promising but then didn't get continued, and sort of what was the thinking there. And then I just wondered if there's anything else you want to say around what's interesting about your approach is that you're building platforms. Some of the platforms, as you've used in your own examples, are competing with widely known commercial products, whether it's Bitly or other website builders. Anything else you'd want to share on the rationale for why you go, no, this is worth government having its own trusted version? But yeah, so failures or not failures, things that didn't go out to completion. Anything else on that build versus buy dynamic?
Yeah, maybe I can start with an example, and Talita, feel free to add on later as well. So one of the products we started, we call it OpenDoc, which is, I would say, like a mobile optimized document site. Basically, there were PDFs and they were not searchable. So you could search for your legal documents and all that on this site called OpenDoc, right? So that's why we started. We launched it for mostly the courts in Singapore. We put all the public laws, the acts and stuff like that, and even various policies of government on OpenDoc. But soon after we realized that, hey, why were we doing this when actually most of this information is public anyway, and there are a whole bunch of all these document generator tools out there. I think Gitbook is one great example. So these days actually we are decommissioning it and encouraging agencies to just buy or use even free software out there. Right? So that's one example that I think kind of answers both your questions to some degree. But in order to answer the second question, we thought of this more deeply. By and large, I think a lot of there's a lot of commercial off-the-shelf stuff out there that can be used. There are a few blockers to that, right? The first blocker is a procurement blocker. Because procurement is still quite a lengthy process in the Singapore government. If it's above a certain amount, technically you have to through a tender, you have to invite a few proposals, and it ends up being a 6-month, even 1-year process, which really hampers innovation. So one like a big blocker of just using off-the-shelf stuff is because of still a very troublesome procurement process. Another is about data sensitivity. So in cases where the government officers don't actually want their like sensitive defense data or sensitive foreign affairs data or stuff like that being on the cloud, they would much prefer some kind of on-premise, maybe or a mix of on-premise or at least Singapore servers kind of solution. And in those cases we will come in with some of our products. So it's largely like my answer to this is that most things could just use things outside. But we're often blocked by these two things. And then the next thought that I had is sometimes it can actually be quite difficult to convince agencies that these two blockers don't actually apply to them. There will be agencies that say, hey, actually my data it's really sensitive, but then we sit down and realize, hey, actually, is it really that sensitive? And do you really have to go for the enterprise solution that makes it so difficult in terms of procurement? And I've actually tried this for FormSG, for example, FormSG for multiple such forms for multiple years, and the agencies still refuse to budge. In such cases, you can actually argue that if you just build it, they will just use it. Instead of just constantly like debating over like these two factors, sometimes if you just so-called white label a solution, you could just deliver value to the end user that quickly.
Thank you for explaining that rationale. And I can't see everyone on screen, but I'm guessing some of my CIO colleagues will be nodding away at the frustrations with the procurement teams. It's good to know the UK is not alone in finding that often procurement is where innovation goes to die. I think is often our flippant remark, and an area that clearly needs more attention. Let me pause at this point and invite, I see we've got a question in the chat, or indeed Diana or the legal team. Yeah, don't involve them either if you can. I see my colleague Theo Blackwell's got a question. What's been the hardest, what hasn't worked out? I think you've mentioned some of what didn't work. If there's any other sort of aspects of your activities that are hard, but let me also just pause and say, does anyone want to raise their hand and come in directly? I see lots of digital and IT colleagues on the line. Any questions you'd like to put in person? Please raise your hand if so. Veronica, let's come from you. Veronica from Hammersmith and Fulham in London.
Hi there. Thank you so much. It's fascinating, all the work you're doing. I was wondering, Leonard, could you explain a little more about the authentication and verification sort of approach that you took? So it's really interesting what you were saying about you have a verification service and then separately a transaction service. But how does that work? Because presumably you do want to know the transactions at some level that people are doing. How did you work that out?
Yeah, so this is that privacy preserving identification service that we built, SGID. And when someone first registers themselves, they go through an isolated server called the identity server. And that basically verifies who they are. And then issue them a bunch of encryption keys that they can use to identify themselves to businesses or what we call verifiers. That they that have to share the data with, right? So that's what the identification service is responsible for. They know who you are, and their job is to verify who you are. And then once you have those keys, you are actually assigned for each transaction that you make, you're assigned anonymous identifier in order to make those transactions that stem from those encryption keys, and that's the job of the separate server, the transaction server. That is logically isolated with the identity server, and in the future possibly even managed by a completely different team. So there's like clean separation between the two. That it's you can't so-called put the two together and realize who did what from this kind of design. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to raise their hand with a question? Don't be shy. Let me refer back to chat. Well, whilst you're thinking of your fantastic work, well, okay, so let's hear from Barry, then we've still got Theo's question to come back to. Barry from Barnet.
Hi everybody, thanks for that. It was really fascinating. Certainly ticked the box of seeing something different this time in the morning. Really made me think, like Veronica, the SGID verification thing sounds fascinating from a local government perspective, and just the way you thought about that is really interesting. I think my question probably, there's a few that have already kind of been asked around kind of how you move from experimentation to scalability, which was really interesting as well. But I think my question probably, the one I've got left in my mind is, you've obviously got a really big team. You've got big product teams. Do you find skills, the skills market a challenge in Singapore, like resourcing the teams that you have? Is that a challenge for you as well as it probably is here in the UK? And if so, do you do anything to influence the market?
Yeah, I can answer this one. So I think hiring has been a big part of my role. I would say about 70% of my time the past year. So we do a few things. So one is to actually work on getting market competitive compensation. I think that's the biggest factor, because ultimately people still have that. Sure, there's the mission of public impact, which is really important, and we only admit people that have that heart to serve. But it's also about how much they're paid. And so we actually benchmark against, I would say, FANG salaries in the region. So Facebook, Amazon, and stuff like that. Of course, we don't match exactly, but we're relatively close. And justifying, like building that case, that was a big part of our I would say, hiring efforts. Then next is also proactively source of candidates. So these days in this very competitive, especially in the tech sector, when you're trying to look for talent, you can't just put a job description and expect people to apply. We actually engage recruiters, and I think, like myself as well as hiring manager for the product role, I actually message a lot of people with personalized templates on LinkedIn, for example. Like, just as a rule of thumb, in 6 months I sent out 2,500 messages on LinkedIn, out of which I had 500 coffee chats and eventually hired about 10. So that was so-called the 70% of time of those 6 months. It was, I would say, to some extent a grind of sorts, but that's really what you need to do in this, I think, fairly competitive landscape of putting yourself out there as well. I think not just relying on recruiters. I think one of the things that made our messages stand out is because as a hiring manager, I would send the message directly to candidates when all these good candidates were actually receiving a lot of messages from recruiters. So we stood up like a bit more. And of course, the third thing is to and to find the right people as well is to hammer home the point of public service, that this is a different type of job, where we're not here to maximize profits, although technically you'll be paid quite well as well. We're really here to serve, to solve problems for public good, and which was the core focus of my, of the messages that I sent out to LinkedIn, and the coffee chats that I had, that I think ultimately made the choice for some of these candidates.
Okay, thank you. So you put in the hard work. There's no easy answer to that one. Put in the mileage.
Lots for us to reflect on, both Barnett and Lottie, I think there. Diana, you'd like to come in?
Yes, thanks very much, Edward. Thanks, guys. I can completely relate to the skills gap. It's just, it's been tragic during the pandemic, especially. We lost so many people. They just went to do private consulting instead because the money was so much better. I wanted to follow up on my question around digital literacy and kind of the gap, because here we do try to make digital by default in terms of services, NHS, public services. I work in public health, but we still run into the issue of digital literacy and some people not having skills or equipment to deal with it. So I thank you for addressing that question within the talk about the vouchers, but I was just wondering whether you have broader government program to bring people up, to skill people up and kind of provide that space or I don't know, equipment, whatever. So if you could share, that'd be amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, I can take this one. So as a government, we have an initiative to try and train up digital ambassadors to help seniors as well as the merchants themselves adopt digital solutions. So one of the big drives was actually to help merchants, for example, adopt digital payments. And actually the ambassadors went from merchant to merchant, teaching them how to sign up and accept digital payments. And actually a lot of that that work involved a lot of also providing a paper fallback, or maybe all the merchant needs to do is to provide their info, and these ambassadors will take down the details. So yeah, we also have some efforts, for example, to support the seniors by providing phones. So for seniors who need help. Yeah, so those are some of the efforts. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you for that. Let's just have a look. So there's a question from Scott asking about what technologies Isomer is built on. Scott says, from your open source repositories, he sees that you've got a back office database driven CMS. I assume you then build a static site from that. What CMS is that compatible with, and what do you use to create that static version? If you could maybe expand on that a little bit about Isomer.
To be honest, like I have to get back on this. Like the actual technology used is something that the team recently moved from. I recall like okay. So firstly, we're mostly hosted on like GitHub. Like how it works is that we actually have like a central GitHub repository of the core like Isomer template, and then each agency's website will like fork the repository, so that that's how we like centralize the design, and whenever there are design updates, we do our user research and stuff like that. Like all the agencies get a good design. I think like in terms of like hosting that, I think where I think it should still be on like Netlify, if I'm not wrong. In terms of like building that, to be honest, I'm not sure. We do have a CMS, and like the CMS came a lot later. At the start, like agencies actually had to use GitHub directly, so they had to write Markdown in order to like modify content of their sites. And some agencies, were okay with that. We provided like training workshops, but at some point we realized that in order to scale this and make it a lot more self-service, we built a CMS around the GitHub Markdown editor. But yeah, I could link up the Isomer team to get back on the exact technology that they're using. Like, at this point, I think they're trying out a few new ones.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I know you're here today because you want to share with other nations, other city governments as well. And so Mike is expanding on that point in the chat, just asking, have other nations or cities developed or adopted your products? Are you developing any of them with other geographies?
I would say there have been like, so firstly, we're quite early on this. I think we're still at the state of so-called testing that they work for Singapore first before so-called confidently, propagating everywhere else. Because if it doesn't work for us, we don't want other people to use our stuff that doesn't fully work. We have a few pilots, I would say, in the US. In New Jersey, for example, where we're quite close with the folks in New Jersey. They've used, like, I think, if I'm not wrong, I think they've deployed like form.gov.sg in a few of the smaller use cases. But I think more broadly, we've had several product team conversations with different governments. We've had like, okay, maybe I can give a few concrete examples, right? So during the pandemic, we advised, I think, no, wait, hold on, not the pandemic. No, yeah. More recently, sorry, Vietnam. Yeah, we did Vietnam. I think we did, if I'm not wrong, I think in Indonesia as well, if I'm not wrong. And beyond that, like we've spoken to like payments team in like the UK. We've also, like the Isomer team has also spoken to them about their website design, because I think that UK GDS, they have like so-called all their websites under like a common theme. Seems to mirror some of our efforts as well. And notification service as well. I think we reach out to like the Australian government on that as well. I think they have a similar service. So I think we're quite early days on this in terms of like concrete collaborations, but just a lot of different mutual learnings and conversations happening.
Fantastic, very up for that, and I'm glad that you'll see what London can do with Singapore. Talking of London, London's Chief Digital Officer Theo Blackwell would like to ask something. Theo.
Hi, hello again, everyone. Great to see you. So my question is about some thinking I'm doing at the moment, which is more on the kind of how to foster innovation within the strategic authority. and this is more on the kind of policy side, I suppose, rather than kind of strict government transaction and moving things from paper, because GDS has done a fair amount, and obviously local government have got their own programs which LOTI are assisting with. But in terms of, let's say, assisting a policy team tackle an issue that's a big public concern, like air quality, do you assist them in the problem identification process and help them solve those problems, which may be quite small and edge rather than big ones, but ones that if you gained momentum and solved them problem by problem, you would over time really make a difference? And if you didn't do that, you'd just be stuck in a rut, if you see what I mean. So it probably tends more to, the sort of discussion about how people do open calls if they don't have the capacity, and how you build confidence in those teams that design, data, digital can be something that they can employ. How do you sort of tackle those issues?
Yeah, I can take a stab at this first. So one of the concepts that we're experimenting is called vertically integrated policy teams, where our product teams actually involve someone from policy very closely as we build product to build that feedback loop. So one example is when we're designing the vaccination system for Singapore, where the policy folks together with the medical board, had different comments on how, like the number of days, so-called between jabs should be phrased, right? There was Moderna, there was Pfizer, all of these had like different number of days. And if we, strictly follow medical policy, we would, I would say, end up with a product that's medically precise. Imagine if you're a certain age group, and if you had a certain health condition, then you need to wait, like, I don't know, I'm just pulling this out in there, but something lines of like 16 days. But if you're a different case, you'll be 17 days. That'll be quite hard to communicate. But so that was where the policy came from, and where we came from was to represent the voice of the user, which was, hey, I think it's probably very difficult for the average person on the street to comprehend such policy. So we gave that feedback, and we worked together on somewhere in the middle, which is like, just so-called one day difference for a different vaccination type, right? And that's what we ended up building. So that was one example of how we work very closely, I think, with policy teams in order to create user-friendly policy as well.
And sorry, just as a follow-up, do you have a sense that the more that policy teams understand your work, the more they feel they've got to build their capacity in order to kind of start that conversation? That conversation is for them to have with you? Or do you see still a little bit of friction there where they're not taking up the full opportunity?
I would say maybe I can take this one and follow up from where Leonard left off. I think it's both of what you mentioned. So I can share from the fiscal policy context, where, for example, in voucher schemes and social assistance programs, at the very start, a lot of what we design is basically we'll take the policy as is and design about the product around the policy. But we realize that that's inherently not scalable, because every policy design is so complex, so complicated. And if we wanted to design one product to serve the whole of government, then we need to go upstream and keep on engaging the policymakers and sharing the context of what we've learned. And I think you also had a question earlier on, like, what's the hardest? I would say actually one of the hardest things is managing the tension between two different cultures. One which is policy, which is long-term and being very targeted, versus the product teams, which is ground up and very fast, right? The clock with such a tight clock speed. And I think what we've done is what Leonard said, which is to integrate it by bringing both on the same page and building trust between the teams as we talk to them more. Yeah, I'm not sure if that answered a bit of your question.
No, I mean, I think it's it's our universal challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Hi, Theo. Just to jump in here as well. I think one of the big things that we've learned is that tech is such a big part of the story of almost any sector, any agency's work today. And yet the traditional policymaker, I mean, I came from 3 government ministries before joining this particular team, doesn't sees tech as a downstream consideration, sees tech as something that you outsource to after you figured out all of your considerations, your specs, your requirements, and then tech comes into the picture. When actually most of what these considerations need to be fed back into policy. It's things like, how do you prioritize what the time taken to build something versus the impact that it can actually have versus the usability of all of these features. Things like whether or not your tech is designed to encourage the behavior and the nudges that you actually want in the first place. If not, you would have like a really fancy system, but it might not nudge towards the behaviors that you're looking for in the policy space. So I think it's really what Lena and Talita have been talking about. It's really important where your policy folks have a bridge between policy and tech. There's someone who can speak to both sides. There's someone who can communicate both on the policy part as well as the tech part, to be able to share what the considerations are on both ends. A big example I can think of is in the phishing and scam space. Singapore has been a huge target for phishing scams across from the whole of Southeast Asia. People from Vietnam, from Thailand, from Indonesia, and there are many of these scam farms that are out there that are targeting Singaporeans for a whole bunch of reasons, primarily connectivity and high savings rate. And many millions, hundreds of millions of dollars have been lost through this. But in thinking about solving this problem, so much of it has to do with tech solutions. Like you can't possibly use manual solutions to solve phishing in a country. The typical way of like looking at individual phishing websites and marking whether or not something is a scam or not, it's not going to work. You need scalable solutions. You need things that are literally in the millions of being able to both crawl websites as well as like have some kind of feedback loop to be able to work into your algorithms. And so that's when tech comes into the picture as well in what would be a traditional policy space where you would say regulate your websites, regulate e-commerce, regulate messaging apps, social media, websites, and so on. That regulation is so much more downstream, whereas many of the solutions that need to be deployed here are actually tech solutions. Yeah. So I think that's one example. Yeah. And kind of how we've tried to structure it is by placing as much tech expertise as possible within the policy realm and provide that advisory. To be honest, I think there's still a long way to go. The culture is still very much one that's very policy heavy. It's still very top down. Its decisions are made by the either political level or your senior management level, and then they're translated down. But at the same time, like when you have this value add, when you're like, hey, actually, this is what tech can do. This is what feasibly can be solved. I think that's what when people really start to listen. For us, it's been building up a suite of products that has gained enough traction, has been successful, and has had good user adoption and take up. And when that happens, I think with that proof of concept, people tend to listen to us a bit more. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid we're out of time. I have no idea how the hour suddenly disappeared. Thank you to all of our Singapore colleagues, and especially to Stephanie, to Leonard and to Letha for giving up their time. A fascinating story, fascinating just to help us expand our minds as to how things are being done differently elsewhere. As Barry said, a really inspiring way for us to start our morning. We wish you best of luck with all your future endeavours. LOTI looks forward to staying in touch with you. Keen to show our appreciation with a virtual clap, or you can just raise your hands and do this. For everyone who's joined today, thank you for your time this morning. Do drop us a note with your feedback if you'd like to see more sessions like this one. But for now, thank you very much indeed, everyone, for taking part in this LOTI Leadership webinar. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.